So now we're going to do the push method. And to explain this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk through the steps first. So there's our linked list. Step one is we need to create a new node. So I'm going to bring one in from the right-hand side there, like that. Then we're going to have the last node in the list point to it. And then we're going to have tail point to it as well, and that adds it into the list. That's all simple enough. We do have an edge case that we have to account for, and that is what if we're inserting this into a linked list that does not have any nodes yet? In this case, instead of having the last item and tail point to it, there is no last item, and we're going to have head and tail point to it. As always, after we walk through these steps, I encourage you to pause this and give this a shot coding it. Now we're going to get into the code itself. So we're going to start out with push. We're going to be passing it a value. And as I just said, our first step is to create a node. And we do that with this line here. And that creates our node. And I'm going to start out with our edge case first. Our situation where we have head and tail pointing to null. We want those to point to the new node like that. So I'm going to change this back to these pointing to null like this and bring up our if statement. So we can see if head is equal to null. Now this, if this is true, that means head is pointing to something. So we need to do the opposite of this. So we're going to use that not operator, that exclamation point there, and that makes it the opposite. This is the equivalent of saying if this dot head is false, or if this dot head is equal to null, because null is false. So that's this situation here. So then we say this dot head equals new node, like that, and this dot tail equals new node, and now they both point to the new node. Now let's take this code and put it in with the rest of our code so far, like this. The next thing we need to do is say, well, what if we're putting this into a linked list where it does have nodes? So we're going to say else, and now let's focus in on the else. So we're going to say else this.tail.next equals new node. So if you haven't seen this before, tail up here at the top is equal to this node. So when you say tail, you are saying this node, but the next, let's turn this into an object and look at what this means. So this is tail.next, which is the next pointer in that last node that tail was pointing to. So you're saying have next point to the new node. And we pointed to the new node by setting it equal to the node like this. Okay, so let's switch back to looking at this graphically like this. That is just going to point that arrow to that new node. Then we say this.tail equals new node. We'll move that over there, and that inserts this into the list. Now let's take this code and put it back in with the rest of our code. So far we have created a node. We have this if statement to check to see if the linked list is empty. And then we have the else to insert the node if the linked list is not empty. The only things left to do are to increase the length by 1. And then we're going to say return this. And when we say return this, we are returning the entire linked list. And we'll talk more about that here in a second. So let's flip over to DevTools. So just scrolling through this, we have our node class up here at the top. The linked list class has a constructor and now has our push method that we just created. Down here, we're going to say let my linked list equal a new linked list with a value of 7. And then we're going to push an item on with a value of 4. And this is going to return the entire linked list because of this line of code here. When we say return this, what we are saying is return this linked list because the push method is part of that linked list class. Now, it's not just returning any linked list, it is returning the particular instance of linked list that we named my linked list. Okay, let's go over here and run this. And it has returned the linked list. So let's open this up. And we can see that head points to the 7 node. Up here, that is what we created the linked list with. And then we pushed on the value 4, and that is what tail is pointing to, and we have a length of 2. So it looks like we have a working method for push.